On July 6, 2026, an uncrewed Ukrainian aircraft traversed 2,500 kilometers of Russian airspace and struck the Omsk petroleum facility in western Siberia, marking the deepest successful strike since the hostilities began. That distance stretches farther than London to Rome. For a nation defending its own borders, hitting a target that far inside sovereign territory represents a dramatic shift in strategic thinking. 4 days later, President Volodymyr Zelensky signed a historic decree. This broad executive order established a specialized command within the armed forces, with a singular mandate: penetrate deep into Russian territory and dismantle the industrial engine funding the invasion. Kyiv's initiative illustrates how Ukraine stopped concentrating solely on the immediate front lines and began systematically targeting Russia's energy infrastructure, processing plant by processing plant, vessel by vessel. For a long phase of this conflict, the combat remained restricted to traditional sectors like trenches and artillery duels. That shifted in early 2024. During that period, Kyiv initiated its first wave of long-range attacks against major Russian energy complexes. By midsummer of 2026, this informal campaign graduated into official state policy. Zelensky characterized the newly formed unit as a command of long range, effectively global impact on Russia over this war, shifting the focus away from frontline skirmishes. The logic remains blunt. Without refined petroleum, armored columns stall. Aircraft remain grounded, and logistics convoys freeze on the highway. Instead of attempting to match Russia soldier for soldier in the trenches, Ukraine chose to starve the machine of the revenue that sustains it. The consequences of this choice materialized before the ink on the executive order had even dried. The data reveals how rapidly this operational scope has expanded. During the opening half of 2026, Ukrainian unpiloted aircraft successfully struck Russian processing facilities 194 times, representing an 11-fold increase compared to the same time frame in 2025. Such a surge does not occur by chance. It represents a systematic expansion of long-range strike capacity. Zeroed in on a single economic pillar, out of Russia's 12 largest fuel production plants, 11 have now suffered major damage. Only a single facility remains entirely untouched, the Angarsk installation in eastern Siberia. It continues to operate for one simple reason. It sits 4,450 kilometers from Ukrainian territory, far beyond the operational limits of current technology. Every other site on that target list exhibits extensive damage, proving that this campaign systematically dismantles the country's entire fuel refinement backbone. If watching a modern military campaign rewrite its own rules in real time interests you, subscribe now, as this operational shift accelerates every week. This campaign behaves like a map of the domestic fuel network catching fire. On June 18, 2026, Ukraine launched its largest uncrewed aerial assault of the year toward Moscow, zeroing in on the Gazprom Neft complex in the Kapanya district. 4 vertical storage structures and a processing unit ignited. This targeted structures with a total capacity of roughly 18 million gallons of liquid fuel. Its resulting disruptions radiated far beyond the industrial zone, forcing aviation authorities to halt flights at 4 municipal airports for several hours. Weeks later, in early July, additional long-range platforms slammed into the Ilsky processing plant in Krasnodar Krai and the Ust-Luga terminal near Leningrad. These combined actions severed key supply corridors feeding both the Baltic coast and southern transport sectors. This change caught military analysts unprepared. Instead of restricting operations to inland energy plants, Ukraine expanded theater of operations directly into maritime shipping lanes to disrupt supply chains, directing kamikaze platforms against 48 Russian vessels traversing the Sea of Azov. Their objective remained clear. By choking this maritime corridor, they severed the logistical lifeline supporting military operations in Crimea, forcing Moscow to suspend commercial navigation across the Azov region entirely. Targeting active vessels on the water poses a far more complex tactical challenge than striking a stationary onshore plant. Several of these targeted tankers flew foreign flags, with some registered in the Marshall Islands, and chartered by multinational corporations like Chevron, though they were sailing in ballast at the time. As a result, the diplomatic fallout spread quickly. It entangled neutral countries and global oil giants in a regional dispute. Inside the domestic Russian market, the logistical squeeze quickly affected ordinary citizens. By midsummer of 2026, motor fuel output plummeted to 65% of peak seasonal demand, creating a large fuel deficit right during the height of the summer travel period. Approximately 50 million residents, representing over a third of the national population, face strict fuel allocation protocols. In occupied Crimea, authorities suspended commercial sales entirely. They prioritized remaining fuel reserves exclusively for administrative and military vehicles. Over in Irkutsk, Alyona Sadovnikova, a 26-year-old mother, waited at a retail station from 11 o'clock at night until 5 o'clock the following afternoon. That meant 18 hours of waiting alongside her husband and their infant child. She later described the experience to journalists, expressing disbelief that the country had reverted to Soviet-era shortages where basic goods required ration coupons. This single family's ordeal illustrates the real-world impact of the campaign, showing how localized infrastructure damage translates into empty fuel tanks for households located thousands of kilometers away from the combat zone. These figures require careful interpretation. Ukraine's military leadership reports that the targeted energy installations account for more than 42% of Russia's total processing capacity. Yet the actual drop in Russia's domestic commercial output measures closer to 12%. That gap carries more meaning than first appears. What pressures the Kremlin is not immediate industrial collapse, but rather the element of timing. High seasonal demand spiked precisely when unexpected strikes knocked production infrastructure offline, creating a deficit that directly affects consumers. In response, Moscow authorized a temporary rollback of domestic fuel quality standards from Euro 5 to Euro 3, exchanging environmental cleanliness for sheer volume to keep retail pumps running. Official acknowledgments now emerge from senior administrative levels. During that same period, Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak publicly confirmed that domestic fuel facilities had partially suspended operations due to aerial strikes, forcing the government to draw down federal reserves to stabilize the market. Meanwhile, the Defense Ministry claimed its air defenses intercepted tens of thousands of Ukrainian uncrewed systems in early 2026. While that soaring tally lacks independent verification and warrants skepticism, the statement itself highlights the broad scale of this aerial confrontation. Observers now describe this strategy as kinetic sanctions. It uses cheap components and payload delivery to achieve what years of international economic pressure and global court rulings could not manage in a comparable time frame. The conventional front line still demands heavy resources, but it no longer stands as the sole theater of operations that will ultimately decide the outcome of this conflict. Ukraine has transformed Russia's primary export asset into its most vulnerable liability. This newly established command plans to exploit this weakness systematically. With Western Siberia now in the crosshairs, even Russia's most remote industrial bastions are losing their geographical shield. The target list continues to expand. Strategic planners are shifting focus toward pipeline intersections and major shipping terminals along the northern coast. This transition positions the campaign to evolve from a tactical disruption into a permanent economic blockade. If this operational evolution shifts how you view the modern face of conflict, like and subscribe, because the strategic maneuvers unfolding over the coming months will likely reshape the geopolitical balance for years to come.